Welcome. I'm Michael Denon, Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning and Dean of the Division of Undergraduate Education here at UC Irvine. And this is Conversations with the Vice Provost, where we take on issues of interest to the campus, the state, the country, and even the world. And it's really exciting for me today to have with me Dean Rameen Talesh. He's the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Life and Leadership. I almost promoted him accidentally. Okay. And the Dean of Students. I get that all the time. People try to promote me to Provost, and I really want to avoid that. But great to have you here today, Rameen. I think we have three great topics, but the first one I really want to go to is a word that's in your title. It's leadership. I think it's an important thing for our students, but it's a really broad topic, and kind of like to just get you starting on some of your thoughts on leadership, and we'll go from there.
You know, I think one of the things that's really interesting about UCI is that we have a large number of alumni that have actually gone in the field of student affairs. Hundreds and hundreds of staff members across the United States, really, that are in positions of leadership in student affairs, and they're UCI alumni. And this is from different eras, 70s, the 80s, 90s, all the way up. And so, I think it's a really unique thing here at UC Irvine because we don't have a master's degree program or doctoral program in higher education administration. A lot of campuses that do, they feed a lot of people into the profession. And so what I think we hypothesize here is that over time, student affairs has been rather small on our campus, maybe compared to some of the bigger UCs and other campuses. And so we really had to rely on student leadership to convey the work, convey our interests, our goals, our intentions in terms of promoting student life on the campus. And so we have put a lot of value on student involvement, student positions, whether they're resident advisors, orientation leaders, interns, volunteers, you name it. There has been a great emphasis on putting a lot of responsibility on students' shoulders. And I think in return, students, and this is just an example of it, they grow and they develop and they've really kind of cultivate their leadership in different ways. And I think over time, intentionally then, what we do in student affairs is we're trying to really promote leadership. And it comes in all shapes and forms, but we're really trying to make sure students can go out there and get the tools they need, the training, the support, the challenge, so that they can go out and really mentor other students, so that they can bring students in, make them feel a sense of belonging, a sense of connection to the campus. And they're doing really kind of the work that we're trying to do, but they're the ones actually going out and executing it, because we believe students learn from students a lot of times. More so than sometimes they learn from administrators or faculty. They learn from each other. And so if we can create a culture where it's a positive culture in terms of leadership, in terms of engagement and involvement, then they're going to go out and learn from one another in those positive ways. And and as I mentioned, hopefully in the teaser that people maybe watch, is that they go off and then they exercise this leadership in whatever they do in the world, in their careers or whatever. They go on and we see it a lot. We see it when we're very proud of our alums and the ways in which they're impacting the world right now. And so leadership really is, the thing that is a part of our name and there's a purpose behind it too.
Yeah. Do you find, and this is just a question I have, when I talk to people from all the different segments of campus, one of the things, having been here the length I have, is I do think we're in that transition phase from what I would call, even though we've always been kind of big, truly a small, new campus, right? We're still just over 50 years old. To really, the growth in our student body in the last few years has just been unimaginable. We've had, I think, an appropriate growth in non-resident students that bring a richness to the campus, but a new dynamic. And everybody hopefully knows about all the stats on our first-gen students, our social mobility success, but a lot of that is new too, in terms of numbers. We recently became Hispanic serving, for instance, and so that's a change in the population. Has that brought a different flavor to the leadership, at all, do you think? A richness there maybe or something?
Absolutely. Yeah. I do talk about this a lot with people too, because I'm an immigrant, where my parents were immigrants, and I'm the son of immigrants. Right. And I think there's a richness to that first generation experience in terms of the student body that we have. And if I can take a moment to talk about that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our students, they're here because of their parents and their sacrifices that their parents have made.
Yeah.
And so when you see your parents and what they want and what they're working multiple jobs and what they're doing is all for their children or their kids. And really what they're doing is they want them to get that education that will hopefully allow them to, kind of have a greater richness in their own life and their own aspirations and meeting their own goals. And so there's a sense of purpose, I think, that allows our students to feel a real sense of commitment, a sense of purpose to what they're doing. Now, with that sometimes comes pressure too,
right,
and stress and those things. And we have to be cognizant of that, and we need to be able to support our students through that. But I think it's really special where we have students that are here for the right reasons.
Yeah.
They're really here to learn more, and they're here, and they often have a sense of wanting to give back too, because of the circumstances of what they're coming in with. And so, to me, that first generation, I love it. I think it's the absolute, it's a reason why I feel it's very congruent with my own values of what I want to do in education. And I think it's a real specialness. We don't have students that are here because they want to be a part of some admission scandal, or they don't want to be they don't want to be, kind of gifted something like that. That they're here, they're working hard, they see and they are hoping for a return in that way, and they're doing it with a great sense of purpose and pride for their own, it's kind of sacrifices being made with their own families. So, I mean, that's not everyone's experience,
right?
But I think
it has a seed.
Oh yeah, because I think it makes it special to work in an environment where your students are here for the right reasons. They're not here just to party for 4 years and goof around and just leave because that's the legacy of whatever they've seen before. They're here with a great sense of purpose, and I think. That to me is very special, and I think that's what I love about UC Irvine right now. It's so congruent with I think many of our values in terms of access and social mobility, and so it makes you want to come to work and make a difference.
That's really exciting, and this just struck me. It may not be strictly in the topic of leadership, but I want to kind of go here a little bit because not really as an outsider to your organization, but kind of as an outsider, right? I mean, we partner in a lot of things. But, in my world, in the academic affairs world, I'll be at national meetings and stuff, and occasionally we're joint with student affairs people, and more recently I've heard from other universities concerns about the siloing among student groups, right? Like the students stay just in their group, and they don't want to interact. And I wonder if you could comment on, one of the great things I think we do is all the student leaders and volunteers in the summer orientation program. And when I look at them, it's students from all over the campus, all types of students, and a massive, large number of them. Yeah. And off the top of my head, I'm sure there's other examples, but I feel like the way you guys have structured your leadership side of things really brings together these different groups that we have here and leverages that diversity in a positive way so students do interact across these sectors. Is that something you find? Are there still some challenges in that space, perhaps?
I think there are always challenges in this area. And I actually, I teach at USC sometimes classes for higher education, and I've been at other campuses and I've worked at other campuses. Right. This is not a unique experience or a unique complaint necessarily, where people are saying, "Hey, we're siloed." Right. All my time in higher education, 29 years, I've heard that same thing. So it's not completely unique. Now, it's all, because I think there's always a desire to break that down, to build more bridges, to get more cross-fertilization in that way. So I think there's always that great desire, and you always feel like, well, we're not quite there. So I think that exists, but I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with people finding their support networks.
Oh yeah, certainly. No, I agree totally. Yeah,
and so on and so forth.
Yeah, all I was saying is I do think the leadership piece seems to be a place where people naturally come together across sectors.
Yeah, and that's partly why it's a part of our name. Yeah. We wanted it to be broad, and we want it to be inclusive of everyone, really. Yeah. So leadership should be a part of everyone, no matter their backgrounds, no matter their political persuasion, spiritual backgrounds, whatever. We're all trying to improve ourselves. We're all trying to, and that in essence is what leadership can be about too, improving yourself so that you can go out and make an impact on the world.
So just to wrap up, can I steal your tagline about what happens to anteaters here, or would you like to share that?
Well, yeah, what I like to always say is that, we're always thinking about anteaters, and we have them as anteaters, but we want them to leave as ant leaders.
Exactly. And we know we got a big laugh for that one out there, Rameen.
Well, yeah, sometimes.
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 Well, I do think sort of building off of that and the inclusive comment, when we think of inclusivity, I think as you sort of mentioned, you can't avoid a little bit of challenges in that space. And a big area in your job is sort of navigating, helping our students navigate the space of free speech and difficult conversations. I think maybe, if you don't mind, perhaps a way to start the conversation, and you don't have to be too specific though, is there a particular free speech challenge that you came across in the last few years that was particularly impactful on you in a way that made you sort of think about it either in a new way or be really proud of our students? Because personally, again, this is a space, I'm glad it's not part of my job, but I'm really proud to be at UCI because I feel like your office, you and our students, and I'm sure you'll agree largely our students, actually navigate this space quite well for an undergrad campus.
Actually, I would agree with that. When I started in this role, I worked in the 90s here on campus, and I was a student in the 80s. When I came in 2006 back to the student life area in Dean of Students' office, I would say there was more hostility, actually, quite honestly.
Right.
Students, community members, stakeholders were very much like, why are you bringing these people here? Get them out of here. Really, a lot of disregard for free speech, quite honestly.
Okay.
Not really understanding free speech at all. I think we've come a long way. Certainly it helps to have our Chancellor out there being a great spokesperson in terms of free speech on campus, writing a book with Dean Chemerinsky. I think that has helped the narrative and helped the discussions happen. And certainly we have, over time, continuously worked with our students, student leaders, trying to have them have a more nuanced understanding of free speech and the importance of it. And so I think when you talk about suppression of speech or censorship of speech or those kinds of concepts, students do relate to that and understand that and push against that.
Right.
So I think there are some ways in which we've been able to speak to students more clearly. But certainly I think the most challenging aspect of it, probably in the last 5 years, has been this notion that some of us administrators, that we work with students, we want to help students, we're supportive of students. And I'm not just talking about myself, but my staff and the rest of my team. This is what they do for a living. Really being kind of called out in terms of not being supportive of students because we're not willing to necessarily say, no, we want to disinvite that person, or no, that person should not be on our campus, because they have views that in some cases are problematic, negative, not in congruence with our values. So that has created a little bit of this interesting nuance where there wasn't a time when it was like a personal attack almost, or a personal, like, as the Dean of Students, you're not doing your job and you're not standing with the students here. And these are the students that we would normally consider our student leaders. And that's okay, because I think it's not a bad place. It's coming from a good place. And that's something that we have to kind of remind ourselves about, to say, the students are aspirational here. They want to see a world with less racism and homophobia and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and why not? It's actually where I stand.
I think we all have that goal, and I think that's the challenge.
So it puts us in this awkward, unique situation where we may have individuals that come here and spew out vulgarities and topics that are not congruent with our values, and yet here we are as the Dean of Students or other administrators in my office kind of protecting that. That's probably been a big challenge lately.
Well, that's an interesting, I had never thought of it that way, Rameen, and that's really interesting how the bulk of the time, your role on campus is the student advocate, right? And in this one space, you guys are now suddenly the free speech advocate, right? Which may or may not, from the students' perspectives, look like being the student advocate. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's a challenging way. And I think, there's a similar dynamic going on, I think, in classrooms across the country now, right? Where the whole issue of students wanting to feel safe in the classroom, and yet the university being the place fundamentally where I think we're most challenged as humans when we come. I mean, I had a conversation with some of my colleagues across, we had our sort of national meeting, and I made the statement, which I think I still stand by. The language is a little weird, I have to refine it, But in a weird way, the goal of the university is to change students. And no matter who you are, right? And if nothing else, the change is that you've now thought carefully about your values and ideas, and you have better reasons for believing them.
Absolutely.
Right? So that might be all that the change is, but we expect, if you're not different at the end of 4 years in some way, right, why pay all the money to come here?
I mean, it should be about some type of growth.
Yes, exactly.
And development.
Yeah.
And I have to remind students sometimes. We have great student leaders, and they're incredibly intelligent and challenging in that way, in a good way.
Yeah.
But I have to sometimes remind them, because sometimes they say, "Why did that person say that?" or "Why did that student do that?" And I say, "Look, our students sometimes are coming. They're 17, 18-year-old to 22. They're coming maybe from environments that have not been as diverse.
Right.
They may be coming from coming in with all kinds of biases that they've gained or been socialized over time, and they're coming here. And so this is the great opportunity to grow and to learn and be challenged and to think differently. And sometimes we forget that, these are all incredibly smart students because they got into UCI.
Right.
And so we're very proud of that. But they're not necessarily as developed in all of these ways.
Yeah.
And so we have to give people some grace sometimes to maybe say something that is something that's offensive, for instance, at one point. They may not know that what they're doing. I tell people all the time, I've been to hundreds of diversity workshops. I really have. And that doesn't mean I might say something that may offend somebody, or that I didn't know about or not understanding about. So the key is, if that person comes to me and says, "Hey, do you know that when you said this, that was kind of offensive for these reasons?" And do I embrace that and say, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know that. I'm going to work harder to change my language," or because I don't want to hurt people.
Yeah,
that's not my intent.
Exactly.
Or am I sitting there going, "Well, that's free speech. I can do whatever I want. I can be offensive." So if we have that last part, well, yeah, then we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But I think in most cases, most of our students would fall in the first category. And so then we need to give them that opportunity to stretch and grow, because I want people to be open and honest in the classroom and outside the classroom and be themselves. But also, if they make mistakes or if they say something, then it's maybe a learning opportunity. And as an educator, I'm always looking for that learning opportunity. And sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes it may mean that we have something offensive that happened on the campus that everyone's mad about. My role then as an educator is to now, okay, how can we capitalize on this moment, this unfortunate moment, to then make sure people are educated, make sure they're learning.
And what I like about that, and I think it's a great challenge, we see now, look, the country, someone made this quote the other day, no one can deny whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, we're highly divided as a country. And in the end, that's not good, right? Like we don't make progress as a country when we're this divided, right? And part of it, I think, for our students is recognizing, the people we bring in, as challenging as it may be, as offensive as it may be, as painful as it may be, those are real people who are out there outside the university doing these things, and we're here to help you navigate that space so you can learn how to deal with them.
Sure.
Right? Is the other side of the coin, I think, a lot of the time. Is you're going to have to deal with this in a world where you don't have a dean of students to help you and support you. So it's part of the skill building of working in that space.
Building, some resiliency to that. And on a campus, in our campus, I like to also always say, hey, students have a right to protest.
Yeah,
and
that's the other side. You want to learn how to do that.
I like UCI today much more than I liked it when it was more quiet and just kind of like, we're growing small a little time. It feels more vibrant, and it should. So I think, and students should have a right to protest in a variety of ways.
Yep.
Now, obviously, from me and my role, if it turns into more destructive elements or, damaging things, then we're going to have problems. Right. But I think most of our students, and I said this even when I've spoken in wider audiences, our students are pretty good, actually. They will push, they will protest, they'll do their thing. But when it comes to a point where they're really going to cross a line, they don't.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have more problems from the outside.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
we don't have much control over them.
Yeah.
And when they look at the dean of students, they're like, I don't go to school here. I don't care who the dean of students is. So our level of opportunity to mitigate a circumstance is a lot less at that
when
point.
it's outside.
Yeah.
Well, you said something that reminds me of the cliche, but I think true phrase. The answer to offensive speech is more speech.
Sure.
And that's what those protesting the students are. So it's really, I think our students' reaction to these negative people is always a great thing to see. I mean, if they were not upset by this, if they weren't protesting, if they weren't explaining and challenging why it was offensive, I'd be even more concerned.
And I always tell protesters or potential protesters, let's say you have somebody who's a provocateur,
right,
who really is not bringing much academic substance. They're just there to like inflame people and pick on people and do all those things, say ridiculous things. The thing that they really want is attention.
Yes.
Because that feeds them, that gives them more media, it gives them more money. And so I always tell protesters, think about who's coming and what is it they want.
Yeah.
And don't give them what they want.
Exactly.
So in some cases, not even showing up is the best form.
Yeah.
When you have some of these folks that
Exactly.
we're all probably familiar with that come to your campus, by not showing up, they'd have nothing that come out of it. And actually, they get upset about that because they're like, we wanted that kind of conflict.
Yeah.
We wanted Channel 4 News to be there to catch that conflict. And when they don't get that, they walk away disappointed. Yeah. And so that's a form of really impairing or hurting or protesting and being effective.
Well, like you said, it's learning the different ways to protest and the way to protest the type of thing you want to protest in a way that's most effective.
Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time.
Not all the time, but you got to find the right way to do things. You used a word that's our nice transition, the vibrancy here now. Mm-hmm. So I really do want to transition to, I think, this very exciting time at UCI. What I see, we're just, we celebrated our 50th anniversary a few years ago. We have, I think, growing engagement by our alumni. Obviously, I'm going to date this video. Our first win in an NCAA tournament is a big deal. But Peter the Anteater has consistently won the mascot tournament, by all accounts. So we are at, I think, a more vibrant stage for the campus. And I think a lot of it comes from your office and building these student activities. You always hear the problem, if we just had a football team. And I'm like, no, we do really well. I mean, that could be fun. I'm not against football. I like football. This is not a anti-football statement. Let's be clear so that the haters don't start posting against us. But I think we are doing amazing things in that space. And just curious, some thoughts you have on that, the trajectory, how we got here, what's going on with that?
No, I think you're completely correct, Michael. When I came in as Dean of Students in 2010, the first thing I did, I changed the name of our office. We were known as the Office of Dean of Students. And I thought that was very confusing to people. Is it my space? Is it like, what is under a Dean of Students? Maybe they watched a movie and they have a bad impression of a Dean of Students. So we immediately changed it to Student Life and Leadership because we felt like that was more reflective of the work that we're doing. We're trying to be proactive. We're trying to really instill, positive sense of value going forward. We want to have that vibrancy of a student life. And so we changed our name and accordingly, I think, the things that you talk about, we really try to talk about right from the beginning. We have the great honor of having almost all of our students come through orientation.
Right.
And so we try to take advantage of that by setting a tone, a sense of community, a sense of understanding of what it means to be an anteater, and embrace that. And so, I think that that's something that is growing, and it is special. I see it in the community. I wear UCI gear all the time. Right. And so I have more and more people come up to me and throw me a zot, or if they're more recent, they'll give me a fist bump, or but they're showing a pride, and there's more on the license plates, and there's more anteater pride in those ways. So I think the campus, even though it's gotten bigger, it also has been able to keep a sense of community. I don't know if it's the ring road that helps with that.
I think structure and physical matters,
it does. And so, what we're trying to do always is just seeing the great opportunities that are here. Take advantage of the opportunities that are here. And I think you're right. When we could be that football school that everyone just follows in line and follows and goes and rah-rah and goes back to their room. But here, we have had to have a culture of students that have created the atmosphere. Yeah. They've created a solstice. They've created dance crews, which we've become famous for. Or, they're making things happen. And they're doing it, and it's on their shoulders to do. And so I think that's the good.
Something in that. So I'm glad you mentioned the dance crews. That's something, and the solstice. Those are both things I've noticed, and like you said, they come from the students. The other big one that I think people don't realize came from the students is the esports.
Yes.
Right, which has also been a big following. And I've been very impressed to follow and watch and our leadership in that space. Are there some hidden gems on the horizon that you might see that you think are percolating up from the students? Because I will say one thing I am excited by, I think our students are rather entrepreneurial. And in our teaser you use the word authentic. I think that's true too, but like our students come here and they know what they want. And if it's not here, they reach out to create it and make it. Yeah. Is there something that we as staff and faculty may not quite be aware of that's like kind of like that you think the next thing that the students are looking at, or are they still too quiet at the moment and we don't know?
If I could predict that, I'd write a book and make a lot of money right now. But I can tell you that every decade the student body is completely different, and the issues are completely different that we're all kind of confronted with. 10, 15 years ago, free speech, not really much discussion. Right. Now it's in the forefront. Yeah. So, it is a little bit difficult to predict. Yeah. I think though, with social media, and with, the presence of things like esports and wherever else social media takes us, these now social media influencers, for instance, they're out there and, they are reaching audiences that are quite large that I'm clueless about, but these students know who these people are. And when we bring them on campus, they have a following of 500 people show up. So it is a little bit hard to predict. I have to believe technology will be a part of that, though.
Yep. No,
and I do think there is a spirit of trying to be unique. And again, that is a great spirit that comes with a lot of entrepreneurship, because there's risk involved, there's carving out new territory, figuring out what that next thing is going to be, and having the ability to maybe push out and forecast in those ways. And so, it's hard for me to say what the next trend will be, but I will say that what we're trying to do is really equip our students with the skills. We don't know the careers 10, 15 years from now.
Right.
When I was a student in the 80s, nobody had computers, or we just started. We had typewriters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And all my friends, they're all a variety of majors. But 5, 10 years later, every one of them seemed to have something to do with technology or computers.
Right.
They were doing video game work. They were doing work selling computers. They were doing work building computers. And so if you would have talked to those folks in the 80s, kind of my generation of students at the time, and said, are you going to be involved with computer? What are you going to do? They would never have said, oh, my industry is going to be revolving around computer manufacturing, computer software, computer this, selling it. None of that. Yet 10 years later, everybody was involved in it. So I think it showcases their ability to also use this tools that they've been given in education to then take it whatever direction it goes. Yeah. And so I think, again, I don't know what the future careers are going to be, but I know that if we can equip our students with the skill sets to be strong leaders, to be resourceful, to be resilient, and to think creatively, then they're going to be successful. And I think ultimately, that's kind of what you try to shoot for when you have a private liberal arts college.
Oh, yeah.
Is you want them to be well-rounded, holistic, so that they can adapt and change. And in some cases, okay, the engineer is maybe going to be an engineer when they leave, but still, that little bit of nuance, the ability to step outside, to have classes in different schools, gives them that opportunity to think differently and not be, even though they may be doing engineering, they won't be thinking narrowly about it. They'll think broadly. Yeah. So I think, that's what we hope, and we're always shooting for that as educators.
I think that is an awesome high point to end on, Rameen. Right. Very exciting vision for our students. Thank you for coming and for your time today. This has been a great conversation. Watch this, and if you like this one, look up our other conversations with the Vice Provost. Thanks for watching. This is the time where you get to be part of the conversation. Comment below. You know the drill. You know how to do that. Subscribe, follow us, look for us on all our social media, and stay part of the conversations. Thank you.